stuff around the world where there's a lot of similarity between a lot of these different ways. So I think we should start with Samhain, since that's kind of the big one, especially for us. And Jamie knows a whole lot about Samhain, so I'm sure we're going to be going back and forth on it a little bit here. So Simonoi or Simonois is the Gaulish word for Samhain, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Gaulish is a mostly incomplete language. We don't know very much about how it was actually spoken, but some people have been reconstructing it. And actually, if I have it here, this is, if you're interested in Gaulish paganism, this book, Ancient Fire, by, and I'm going to butcher this name, Sigomarios Windugeni. This is like kind of, I don't know if you can see it, this is kind of one of the recent attempts at reconstructing Gaulish paganism, which, for those who don't know, Gaulish pagans were like the continental Celtic pagans in modern day France and stuff like that. But the earliest reference to Samhain or anything like that in Celtic culture would be this Simonois or Simonoi. But it was celebrated in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, all over the place. So some of the Irish traditions, we don't know very much about the Gaulish traditions, but we do know a bit about, quite a bit about the Irish traditions. All the fires in Ireland were put out and relit on Samhain to bring about the new year. And so that's a very clear, this is an ending point, because our ancestors, and Jamie, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, our ancestors saw things in a cyclical view versus a linear view. And so it was like, okay, this is an end time, but also a beginning time. And that was a very clear and important distinction for them to be making.
Yes, I can speak to that. And I can also add, when the Druids would light the fire, they used a circular tool that lit the fire. And it was described as having spokes, and they would use that wheel to kindle that new fire. And I think that it was from that wheel that they started, where that ended up coming and trickling down as the wheel of the year.
Oh, wow.
As it was used anytime they would light the fires of all the different fire ceremonies, whether it was a solstice or an equinox. So basically like a flint, but it was a wheel, and it even actually did have spokes. So I found that rather interesting. And yeah, and much like Yule fire, you know, everybody lights out and then everybody lights up. And it's a good thing when we have our need fire in our own personal work too, that we extinguish and relight too. So totally. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because that was something, yeah, I really feel strongly about. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that's a Yule tradition too. I mean, so often we find almost frustratingly similar but slightly off versions, you know, everywhere, all the different cultures having their different things. And I think that our instinct is to want to create one cohesive, you know, easily categorized way of saying this is what this holiday is, this is what this tradition is. But we find that that was never the case anywhere throughout history. There was, you know, in these pre-Christian cultures, like there was no big church telling everybody what to do and what to believe. And so the messiness of it can be frustrating, especially if you're somebody that really wants it all to kind of line up and make sense, you know, and it does. We just have to remember that these slight variations are just flavoring, you know, and they're interesting to learn about. But ultimately, it's really about what you're doing in your personal work. Anyway, so there were great feasts held at Tara in Ireland as well, and that's a common thing. It's almost every culture you look into, feasts. This is a time to feast. and be happy and celebrate. You know, it's not all darkness and gloom.
Yeah, and I think too, what was interesting there is as things changed in other hands and the church came part of it, as was through the clans, it was required for everybody to come. It was a
Mhm.
required attendance. You had to come, you had to show yourself to the chieftain or whatever the title would have been of the clan. And then if it was a kingdom, the clans all came to the kingdom center. And it was punishable. It was
Mhm.
punishable by death if you didn't show. And that was how they kept track of census and taxes and things of that nature too. Well, once the church came involved in it though, then it really got dicey as to keeping track of who's doing what.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just a matter of being and showing abeyance to any royalty.
Right, right. Yeah. Um,
Did I present that right? Did that make sense? I think I tripped on my words maybe.
yeah, I think that made sense.
Okay.
um, so, kind of what we were saying earlier about the how this is like a thin veiled time in a lot of these traditions. Um, it's sort of, since we are in between summer and winter today. It's sort of like this day is outside of time. It doesn't exist within the normal everyday world, and that's why the fairies come out. That's why, you know, you can speak with ancestors that maybe you normally have more difficulty accessing or whatever. And this was a common motif throughout all of them. But the sort of the chaos of everything mixing is what makes the magic, if that makes sense. You know, order is the opposite of chaos, and order is peace. Magic is chaotic by nature, and so, you know, that's why you would get stories about spirits like chasing people around at Samhain, and you get a lot of that's where a lot of the kind of spooky aspects come from. Is like, oh well, if we're open to the spirit world, then all of this crazy stuff can happen on this day. And it you know balances out with Beltane, which is, you know, not the opposite of scary. It's lovely and it's happy and it's kind of childish, and that's that balance there. Beltane represents order because normality will be returning as the dark scariness of winter is leaving. Um, and yeah, so speaking about the church. Actually, well, real quick, I want to talk about Don the Guardian. Don, Donn, was an Irish Celtic god of the underworld, and it was said that his house was off the southwest coast of Ireland. Though this could be metaphorical because the directions are very important in Irish mythology. The different sections of Ireland represent different things, and the south is often tied with mysteries, and so is the west, so it's southwest. But yeah, in reference to the church, all it, all saints day, you know, where you celebrate all of the saints, could have come from an early Irish tradition of Samhain being all God's Day in a way. There's some references to the fact that all of the gods were celebrated on Samhain, because it's the beginning of the year, and so you want to make sure you get them all in, and appease
Get your good
everybody.
graces in before the year starts.
Exactly, exactly. um, but yeah, do you want to talk a little bit more about how the church was changing stuff? I mean, I also have information about like the Anglo-Saxon ways of celebrating and some of the Norse ways of celebrating, but I don't know if we want to.
Oh, we could surely talk about that as well. I think the biggest thing that the church, because the church was trying to use the spirituality to control the people, whereas the people understood that spirituality was the dance with life in and of itself, and had no need for that control, that religiosity. And they first really just tried to find whatever they could that was like a likeness, a parallel, so that, oh, okay, well, if you're doing this, this is like this, so that they could kind of hook and sink, you know?
Hmm.
And when it wasn't going the way they would want to, then they would either concede or they would come down heavy. And, you know, we can get into all of that later as far as how things changed in the 5th and 8th, 9th century, at another time, even for that matter, if anybody wanted to, because it affected all of the holidays, not just Samhain.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a standard that's just reflective time memorial.
Hmm.
It's just like always, always. So there really isn't anything more to say than what we do know. But we do know that because they had their Saints' Day, they were able to liken that to our honoring the dead and our gods. So they just said, okay, all right, we give. And kind of the same thing right through Yule, because it was like, okay, if they're going to be drunk and feast anyway, at least they'll be happy drunks. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, let's just
Yeah.
not disturb this one. But yeah, and what you were saying about the happiness and the light and dark, I totally agree with that. And it is important that we honor that dark time and come into that, not only to recognize what from whence we've come, but to dig deeper into ourselves. And that's what the seasons allow. And I think because they were cyclical people, that is why it worked so well that way. And that's really
Totally.
good. Yeah.
Totally, because like if you see your life as happening over the course of a year, if you can take that macrocosm and make it a microcosm,
Mhm.
then the dark half of the year is like being in the womb, being a child, you
Right.
know, and that is the time that you're developing, that you're silent, you're not
Oh,
taking
come here,
things much.
baby.
Oh,
Come
mage.
on. Come on. Yes, you're invited. Come on. Oh, I'm right here. Come on. I'm going to say hi.
Oh.
There you go.
It's a good time for kitties.
Yes, it is. She's like, hey, you're having a party and I wasn't invited.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, as you were saying.
Yeah, yeah, just that it's a good time to go inward and be reflective, and I think that the ancestors believed that and practiced that as well. Almost universally across the entire world, there were bans on storytelling when it wasn't the dark half of the year or when it wasn't some of these certain winter holidays, because those stories are for when people can be quiet enough and have less stimulus so they can really focus and really bring those stories into their heart. And and that's just one example of how we know that the ancestors believed this.
Yeah, firesides. That's where firesides started.
Mhm.
And it was very important. And since we're talking about the dead, even though we look and remember and honor the newly dead, especially within the past year to two, we don't really necessarily share the stories of them. We love them, we remember them. It's the older ones because we don't want to distract them from the
Mhm.
work that they're trying to do. But during Samhain, it's understood that we are going to honor and remember all. So
Yeah.
during Samhain, that's why Samhain focuses on the year or two
Mhm.
recently dead as well. But during any of the other feasts or any of the other times where someone would honor and share a story from a wise one, they would not be mentioning the newly dead.
Right, right.
I don't know if that means anything to anybody else, but I have always found that interesting.
Yeah, I think that's very significant because death is a journey, And when you're first on that journey, it's a big deal. That's why, you were often buried with the implements to help you along,
Right.
is because that first part of journeying to the underworld is the most difficult. Oh, she's so happy.
She's just purring and doing that little tiger chat that she does. It's hilarious.
Where's my kitty? I'm jealous.
Topher, where's your kitty cat? And Misty's saying, mine can just stay away.
Yeah, that little terror has been a nightmare. Tiny terror.
What's he doing?
You didn't see what he was up to this morning.
Oh, gosh.
That's funny. Well, okay, I would like to talk about John Barleycorn a little bit.
Please do.
I love John Barleycorn. This is so our earliest historical reference of John Barleycorn comes from 1568. There's a manuscript, and it has the lyrics of the song on it. And this John Barleycorn song is an old folk song. The band Traffic covered it too. I think a few bands have covered it in modern iterations, but rarely do they change the lyrics because we have this pretty old reference to go back on, and it's likely that the song is older than that, like so many things. So many of our literary sources that we pagans use, they are likely older than the earliest reference that we have to them, because that's just when somebody finally decided to write it down. So the song has a lot of esoteric pagan symbolism in it. When you really go through it line by line, you can find all kinds of stuff. But basically the song is about this man named John Barleycorn, and he gets killed by 3 heroes, and they kill him 3 times. And then they take his body and they parade it through the fields. When you really break that down, John Barleycorn is a representation of the land. He has a long beard that grows, and that's like the beards of, the corn stalks and the barley. And he's likely, this is a more modern name for the Corn King, who was widely worshipped in England back in the day, and corn spirits were very, very important, and that's where we get soul cakes, and corn dollies and stuff like that are related to this myth. And so some of the symbolism is like his long beard. Often the Anglo-Saxon shamans had really long beards and long nails, because they believed that was how they channeled the weird, their magic, and how they channeled fate, was through their extremities. So the longer your extremities are, the more power you have. And sorry, I'm giggling now.
No, I am too.
And that includes all extremities.
We're like, I have the power.
Some of the other symbolism is like, obviously 3 is very significant in Celtic and Anglo-Saxon and Norse and pretty much everybody. So the 3 heroes come from the west. The west is the direction of the other world. Dawn, the Dark One, his house is in the southwest, and he is the lord of the underworld. And so all of this is basically just to say that during this time, it was celebrated that the land was dying, and you would burn effigies or, ritually kill a straw man, and by doing this you were saying, here goes the land, it's all going away, going to sleep, dying, and we accept that and we celebrate that, because we know that it needs the quiet time, it needs the rest, just as we do. Kind of going back to what we were saying. I think that there is an argument to be made, and this argument has been made by a few people, and I personally agree with it, that the Wicker Man is John Barleycorn, that they're one and the same, or at least a different, evolution of John Barleycorn.
I agree. I thought so.
Yeah, and there's, Wicker Man celebrations are, most modern pagans celebrate them in the spring. The Hell's Gate Heathen Kindred that I'm a part of, we celebrate it in the winter at our winter festival that we just had for Samhain. And the reason for that is because the Wicker Man also represents the land, just as John Barleycorn does. So it seems like the more appropriate time to do it. And we don't really know. Our Caesar references the Wicker Man being burned, but he doesn't say when it happens. There are a couple of folk festivals, like Portugal has a Carretos festival, I think it's called, where they burn a Wicker Man, and that takes place in the spring. And, popular representations often have it taking place in the spring, but there is some argument to be made that it could have happened in the winter.
However, if it's happening in the Southern Hemisphere, that would be our fall.
Yeah.
So, there's all kinds of things.
Yeah. And
Consider that.
considering that Beltane and Samhain are, mirrors of each other,
Right.
It really doesn't matter too much ultimately, I don't think. And the Wicker Man film popularized the burning of the Wicker Man, and in modern pagan contexts, and that was in the spring too. And so I think that's why a lot of people just by default kind of do it in the spring, because that movie was such a cultural phenomenon. It was like the first cultural acknowledgement of paganism in film, really, that wasn't altogether negative. I mean, they burned the guy at the end, but
He deserved it.
overall, yeah, he kind of deserved it. He was kind of a punk. So yeah, that's a Anglo-Saxon / Celtic celebration. The Anglo-Saxons, their version of October was, before the Gregorian calendar, was called Winterfilleth. And this would be the first day of Winterfilleth, but also the celebration of Winterfilleth. And so it's funny that all around the world in different times, everybody was celebrating this day, and still is. And in the past, it was the full moon that was more significant than the date. We're just incredibly fortunate to have a full moon on October 31st this year.
Exactly. And a blue one.
And a blue moon. Yep. Yep. So that's very special and very powerful. So, celebrate today. This is a special one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Winterfilleth was a celebration for the Anglo-Saxons too. We don't really know what they did besides feasting, but it's likely that a lot of these Celtic traditions, and these Old Norse traditions evolved into Anglo-Saxon traditions.
What I find interesting too is that it's along and in alignment with the climb and this and the feel of the season. The feasts in this time of year were more reflective, more somber, not irreverent.
Mm-hmm.
There may have been irreverence, so to speak, once you got fireside and getting to really drink a bit, because I mean, we're looking like 6-7 days of drinking sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You can't not be. But there was more of that somber, reflective, reverent time, and especially during the meal, because they were sharing the meal with their dead.
Mm-hmm.
And the dumb face does come from that. So I've always found that interesting, and it was cross culture. From whatever I've been able to see, that they, at least when they're really giving that moment, they're paying that homage. They were very reverent and more somber, even among peoples that really never would be perceived as being somber or reverent.
Totally. And you know, that balance between the the joy and the reverence, you know, the laughter and the tears, like that is a very sacred balance, and I think that it was very well respected, and people knew that Beltane was going to be their time to party. And honestly, Yule was coming up, or winter solstice, or whatever your particular group celebrated. You had, you know, really big fun party times coming up too. But this particular um, you know, this particular time was a time to be joyful that your ancestors are there with you, but also to really take in that sorrow, and to really sit with it and be prepared to sit with yourself for months, you know, because you were going to be less social, and you were going to be you know, feasting less as the winter came. You know, you would have to wait for each festival. um yeah, but I think that there is a healthy way to honor the dead without um you know, making it like overly melodramatic, you
Right.
know. Like there's that balance there too, because you should be happy that you're feasting with your ancestors.
And just being able to work with them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Simple things, just lighting a candle, sharing a meal, breathing in the fall air, or um, sharing the stories, simple things like that, that you don't have to go into the really big, huge ceremonial type rites. And they wouldn't want you to. We're kin. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, just welcome me like I was still here, because guess what? I am.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
I want to dance with you. I don't want to go through all of this other. I just think keeping it simple and really giving more of yourself, your time, your heart, your space is more fitting
Mm-hmm.
of ancestor veneration.
Yeah, and I think that just putting out a meal is something that is so easy to do, and lighting a candle, you know, and you don't have to do anything more than that, and your meal can be,
Mm-mm.
you know, microwave whatever, mac and cheese or something. I mean, it's if you take the time to do the ceremony and to really, you know, maybe make an authentic meal from back in the day or something like that's wonderful, and I'm sure it's appreciated. But it can just be sharing some time with your loved ones, um, because they are here now today more than they usually are. Um, I have just a little bit about some of the Norse celebrations, that that's kind of the last of what I have prepared. I could go through.
Sure.
Let's see. So, Veithar, which is so hard to say. I've been practicing it all day, and I think I just butchered it. But it's the Old Norse word for winter nights. It basically means, and there was a Veithar, which was a ritual celebration, the same as a lot of what is going on in these other paths. And it was a feast. It was a big fancy event. It happened mid-October, full moon, before the Gregorian calendar came in, and so I guess I'm just it's almost redundant to go over all of this for all these different cultures because they're so similar. And I think that sometimes we get a little bit caught up in wanting to do exactly what these people did, or exactly what these people did, or exactly what these people did. And what we find is that they all did more or less the same thing. Dieselblot was likely, possibly synonymous with Veithranatr, and there was also, we do hear about a Disting in Sweden, Disting, which was celebrated in February, but Dieselblot was on the same day as Winter Nights, or was the same thing. There was a great hall to the Disir in Uppsala which was like the center of Norse spirituality, and there were likely big celebrations and events there. The Disir are kind of enigmatic. We get so many different things that say what they are. Some things say that they're goddesses. Some things say they're like war spirits, like Valkyries. Other times they're female ancestors or female Landwahir, which are like land spirits. So they're kind of mysterious, but we do know that they were celebrated and honored this time of year, and we do know that they were female. I think the word, one word for female actually just was Disir. So it's, we know that the feminine is important, which is interesting because this is a time of magic, you know, and we know that the feminine is often associated with magic.
Right. We've covered a bit. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask for clarification? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Or if you want to interject. Nothing? That's okay. I'm grateful that you came on. I'm grateful that we can share some of the ways in the pagan community, the greater pagan community, how things have been done through time and even into now. And then just to remember, even across the board, it did seem to be that it was honoring the end of a year, end of an era, and the beginning of things. And what better way to honor that than to honor those that have been there, done that, and can show us better how to do it. So I think it just fits in really well with that. I just have one little kind of trivia thing. Jack-o'-lanterns really started like back in the Middle Ages, but they were turnips before they were ever pumpkins. I wanted to throw that out there. My grandmother told me that, and I didn't believe her, and I can remember, and I researched it, and I was like, oh, wow. But yeah, they used turnips, and they called them jacks, and it was their way when things kind of got more secularized. Oh, I can't talk. The fire started going more personally to the home and not the community fire so much anymore. So about that time, and people would light their fires, have their personal fires, and have little jack-o'-lanterns to kind of like symbolize like the candle in the window kind of thing. And I just always found that interesting. And it's sad to see things that really had strong spiritual importance that to get lost into the secularized viewpoints and things. But now that we know, we could do better. And I really didn't have a whole lot more. I think have fun with it, whether it be wassail, whether it be soul cakes, whether it be popcorn, or whether it be traditional foods or not. Like Logan said, a box of macaroni and cheese, whatever. Have that time, enjoy that time, enjoy what we have and what we've harvested, and enjoy being able to invite those that live through us to enjoy that with us. And I'm so grateful for everybody being on. And you're my family. And we're going to be out there with a bigger family once this gets posted on YouTube. Heaven help us. But yeah, where we are. And I don't know. That's all I really wanted to add. If nobody has any questions at all, if they have things they want to add, feel free, please.
We love you, Jamie.
Oh, I love you. I love you all so much.
Okay, well, I was thinking about what Logan said about the woman being more of, I don't even know how he worded it. He just said that it was like more in tune, the feminine was more in tune with the magic. Does that mean, but guys have magic too. So I'm confused that they just balanced out both halves of themselves, since we both have feminine and masculine within us. Like, how How does that work?
Yeah, I mean,
Nice question.
yeah, that's a really good question. And that's like back in the day was kind of the traditional view is that the feminine was magical and the masculine was more martial, you know, related to the physical world and stuff like that. But we see like Odin, who's a very masculine character, practiced Seidr, which was a type of magic typically only practiced by women. And you know, so there were these like gender constructs in their societies just like there are in ours today, but we do see that people step outside of them all of the time. And some of the most like magical and powerful men were ones who were able to pass to into the feminine. Like we see Thor dressing up as a bride. We see Loki turning himself into female animals and giving birth, you know. And so there's like there have always been people that have had influence over the greater society that have said female is this way, male is this way, and there have always been people that have said screw you, I do what I want. So I hope that is a decent answer.
Yes, thank you so much. That clarifies a little bit. I am so glad that we got to come here and gather together today on this special time, and I am so happy with all the things that I learned. I've taken notes the whole time.
Bless you. You always have the most amazing questions. It's like you could write a book for all the questions you have. Because I'm sure you've gotten answers by now to most of them, and then you keep making more.
Spread that goodness, try to share it with my family, and hope I fill in any holes that they have, any gaps, and that's all we can do.
Right.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jamie. I'm really
No, not a problem. I
I'm
know
really
you've got to
happy.
get going. You've got the boys and all their activities. Love to you.
Yeah, love you too. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you, Logan.
Thank you.
Anybody? Okay. Nope. Are we all good? Have a blessed sewing.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.